Imagine, you wake up in a dark, dingy clinic, laying on a blood-soaked operating table. You had just awoken from an eerily realistic dream of a beast nearly taking your life as you laid immobile. There's no one else in the room, and the only clue you can find is a hastily scrawled note urging you to find pale blood. As you explore more, you'll run into the very beast from before just down the stairs. You attempt to fend it off with only your fists, but to no avail. With a set of jaws at your throat, darkness comes to you again. This is the experience for most first-time players, and the confusion only continues when you awaken in an oddly serene garden with an equally unassuming building in the middle. Walking up the stairs up to the building, passing a curiously large doll and some grotesque creatures offering you strange weapons, you take them and return to the scene of your death, but this time you're victorious. With the fresh taste of blood in your mouth, you return to the strange garden and discover the doors to the building now open. Going inside, you'll finally meet a friendly face, a man named Gehrman. He explains that you're a hunter now and takes you under his wing as you adjust to this new role. Indeed, he will nudge you where to go and helps you reach the necessary locations to bring an end to the nightmare. Then you will find him at the foot of a great tree in a flower field. He offers to take our life to free us from the dream, and if we refuse, he'll fight us until we submit. The fight itself plays one of the most somber pieces of music in all of the boss themes. This truly stands out as one of the most moving battles in the whole game, and there's no true sense of satisfaction to be had when we finally lay him to rest. This is indeed how I felt on my first playthrough. But now, after countless more playthroughs and a lot more research, I realize there's more to him than this, and this scene has been tainted with other complicated feelings. And it's those exact feelings we'll be exploring in this video. We'll discuss his role as a mentor, his relationship with other characters outside of just the hunter, as well as investigate cut dialogue to understand what character he could have been. There's more to Gehrman than meets the eye, and he deserves to have that side told, for better or for worse. If I had to pick a single quality that the greater community at large applies to Gehrman, it's selflessness. He looks out for you through the entire game, teaching you the ways of being a hunter, and finally frees you from the dream, all the while being trapped in the dream himself. At least, that would be effective characterization if that were all true. In reality, Gehrman is a poor mentor. When you first speak, his words can outwardly seem comforting, but when you dig deeper, you realize that all he is doing is telling you to kill beasts.
Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good. You know, it's just what hunters do. You'll get used to it.
He doesn't explain anything to you when all you want are answers. There's also this odd moment where he seems to struggle with sharing his name.
I am... Gehrman. Friend to you hunters.
We'll return to this later. Now, FromSoft being cryptic is a mainstay of their games, so it makes sense that Gehrman doesn't handhold you. But this isn't the only reason that makes him a bad mentor and helper. After he tells you to go to the cathedral ward, he simply disappears. Everything from discovering the ward, defeating Amelia, and all the way to killing Murgo in the Nightmare at Mensis, that's all just you. Defeating Rom and breaking her barrier to the true nightmare is a source of great confusion for many first-time players, and Gehrman is not there to offer guidance during this. He effectively throws you to the wolves, or beasts, and it's up to you to survive and make it to the end, where he will reward you with freedom. The more you look at it, Gehrman is quite detached from the hunter and doesn't put much more than the bare minimum into helping them. This alone makes the scene in the flower field less impactful, as Gehrman had no vested interest in you reaching that far. So, the question is, was he always like this? It's implied that he was initially more attentive, given that one of the students is described as having great respect for him, which they probably wouldn't have felt if he was equally distant as a teacher. Now he just tells hunters to hunt beasts. He doesn't even appear to teach us how to do that, we just learn on our own. It's not only his feelings towards mentorship that's deteriorated, he used to be more respectful towards beasts earlier in his hunting career. We can learn this through the burial blade description. Gehrman surely saw the hunt as a dirge of farewell, wishing only that his prey might rest in peace, never again to awaken to another harrowing nightmare. But when we talk to him at the beginning of the game, he holds none of this consideration towards beasts.
Yet the town is in disarray. It was burned and abandoned for fear of the scourge. Home now only to beasts. The perfect place for a hunter, wouldn't you say?
Beasts, hunters, he's lost consideration to both. It begs the question, what happened? In order to answer that, let's look into what Gehrman says when he's asleep.
Oh, Lawrence, what's taking you so long? I've grown too old for this. Of little use now, I'm afraid. Oh, Lawrence, Master Willem, somebody help me. Unshackle me, please. Anybody. I've had enough of this dream. The night blocks all sight. Oh, somebody, please.
It could not be more clear that Gehrman is suffering from his time in the dream, and it's not hard to imagine why. He's been here for an immeasurable amount of time. He's meant to help each hunter who arrives here, no matter what. In addition, this environment is in complete stasis. There's not even a day or night here. He's forced to do the same thing in the same setting with no variance, and there is no end in sight. It's no wonder that he's as desperate as he is. Let's return to this line.
I am... Gehrman. Friend to you hunters.
With what we know now, we can interpret the supposed moment of deceit or forgetfulness as something else. Gehrman is weary to the bones of being the hunter's helper, and he almost can't even make himself spit out his name anymore. This also explains his attitude towards the hunter. You are one of countless hunters he's forced to help, and he can't muster forming an attachment anymore. So, he does the minimum he needs to do, but leaves the majority of navigating this nightmare to you. As for the beast, it's likely the same situation. He's seen so many people turn, he no longer sees the humans they once were, and this all results in this disconnect with them both. Now that we have a good idea of how Gehrman sees the hunter, what about how he sees others? There's another inhabitant of the dream that he does not appear to converse with, but will speak of.
Did you speak with Gehrman? He was a hunter long, long ago, but now serves only to advise them.
You would think Gehrman would want to interact with the doll to break the monotony of the day, but he completely ignores her. To better understand his attitude, we need to learn the history of the doll. She was made in the image of a former student of Gehrman's, Lady Maria. She's actually the student who had great admiration for Gehrman I mentioned earlier. This implies that Gehrman treated her with some level of respect, as I can't imagine she would admire him if he didn't. But that appears to only have been true in person. Behind the scenes, Gehrman was consumed by a curious mania, which resulted in the creation of a life-size doll created in almost Maria's image. Her face, hair, and height are that of Maria, but her dress is noticeably more feminine than what she actually wears. Clearly, Gehrman felt this was an improvement over her more masculine attire. Despite how he acted in person, Gehrman fostered an obsession over Maria, creating an idolized version of her in the background. And I say that he must have remained respectful in person because Maria never learned of this aspect of him. He never let his obsession slip and bleed in. Somewhere down the line, Maria died and Gehrman became embraced by the moon presence, becoming a captive of the hunter's dream, where the doll took on a life of her own in the workshop. While Gehrman appears to ignore her, our hunter, along with many others, get to know her quite well. She is a kind individual who strengthens us and provides us emotional support during our grueling journey. Lines where she tells us she loves us, wishing us to find worth in the waking world, and her clapping when we show joy, all this shows attention to our well-being. She also sticks with us throughout the entire game rather than just ditching us for half the story. In many ways, the doll performs the emotional work of looking out for the hunter that Gehrman no longer does. This means that half of Gehrman's job has been shunted off to the doll, and the extent of her emotional labor does not stop here. She is completely subservient to us. There isn't a single moment where she questions what she has to do for you, and that includes killing her. If we consider that she's willing to do this, what else could she be willing to do? You might be catching on to what I'm implying, and perhaps this interpretation seems like a stretch, but the fact that she is supposed to cater to the hunter, help them emotionally during their taxing journey, and, most importantly, cannot tell them no, is it so unbelievable that a hunter or two took advantage of her in this way? Of course, there's the addition of this infamous line where he describes the doll as an object to use.
You're welcome to use whatever you find. Even the doll, should it please you.
The implication that the doll is just something you can find around the workshop is dehumanizing enough, and while you can argue that Gehrman probably meant use as in level up, the way he delivers the line is hushed and sinister, strongly implying something else. On a lesser note, this is also proof to me that he does not converse with the doll, as I can't imagine he would do that if this is how he sees her. Now, this leaves us with two important questions. Was the doll always intended to serve this specific function, and did Gehrman partake in this as well? Personally, I believe no to the first question, and not initially to the second. Earlier we saw Gehrman lose humanity towards beasts and hunters as his suffering in the endless dream wore away at his core, so what's stopping this from happening to the doll as well? Despite how disturbing it is to create a life-size doll of someone, sexual gratification does not appear to be the driving factor behind him doing it. We can see that something else lies under the surface when we read the description for the doll's clothes. Discarded doll clothing, likely a spare for dress-up. A deep love for the doll can be surmised by the fine craftsmanship of this article and the care with which it was kept. It borderlines on mania and exudes a slight warmth. While his feelings certainly weren't healthy, they do not strike me as ones who belong to someone who merely wanted to create a sexual servant. But later, the doll came to life, and whether Gehrman's initial compassion faded towards her right away, or it eroded with time is unknown, but faded it did. And once he reached truly desperate points in his time in the dream, I believe that he noticed what the doll could offer and finally partook himself. It would be easy, wouldn't it? She clearly wasn't Maria. Did she even count as a person at all? Truly, no one would be harmed if he indulged. If you're still certain that the doll was never used in this way, that's fine, but his lack of care is proven further with her dialogue after giving her the hair ornament.
What? What is this? I can't remember. Not a thing, only I feel. A yearning, something I never felt before. What's happening to me? Tell me, Hunter. Could this be joy?
This is clearly the first time she's felt happiness, meaning Gehrman never once showed attention to her like this. Gehrman's treatment of the doll presents him in a much harsher light than even just his earlier detachment portrayed. It's honestly quite heinous. And what's worse is that this aspect is just hidden in plain sight. You do not need to dig very far to find out about the relationship between Maria and the doll. This taints the flower field scene even further. Now it's not just a matter of being detached, it's a matter of keeping an entire individual under one's thumb and ignoring all sense of autonomy in her. At this point in the video, it certainly seems like I have no good opinions of Gehrman at all. Not that it's my fault. But there is a positive in him I would like to discuss. So let's explore a more appealing aspect of him next. We know that Gehrman is suffering from his imprisonment in the dream, but that begs the question, if all that was required to escape is to die to a hunter, then why not allow himself to die on purpose? One answer is that the moon presence won't let him, but I think it's narratively more compelling for there to be something self-imposed keeping him in the dream. I also desperately need there to be something other than cynicism in this man. Please let me have this. What if the reason he doesn't allow himself to die is that because he knows the suffering he's endured as the captive of the dream, he doesn't want anyone else to be put through that? It would be the most selfless thing we've seen in him thus far, but I believe it makes sense. Unlike the other things he withdrew from, his pain is not something he can ignore. It is ever present, and I believe, even in his weakest moments, he can't justify it to himself to put a young hunter through this. That would explain why he'll defeat the hunter again and again until they finally give in and allow him to free them. It's heartening that despite, or rather because, the anguish he's in, he's not so far gone that he'll drop this pain on someone else. But in some ways, this only makes previously discussed issues worse. If he's still capable of altruism, then why lose it everywhere else? His detachment towards hunters can be seen as a defense mechanism. It would be emotionally crushing to become invested with every hunter that he knew would disappear each time. His treatment of the doll, on the other hand, that came from him simply not seeing personhood in her at all. Would he have treated her the same if she were clearly human? I'm not sure, but even with Maria, Gehrman may have shown restraint in person, but he still made a perfect version of her, and for that version to remove all masculinity betrays a strong undercurrent of misogyny in him, not unfitting for the Victorian setting the game is in. So the doll's not only an object, but a woman-shaped one to boot, so him interpreting any humanity in her was never going to be favorable. Neither of these faults I would consider justified, but there's at least a traceable reason for them both. Returning to him shouldering the onus of the dream, even this selfless act depicts a level of detachment as well. He doesn't need to open himself up to accomplish this. He can and does carry it entirely on his own. And isn't that easier in the end, to isolate yourself and just numb yourself to the pain, even though we can plainly hear that he is not truly numb to it? At this point, we have a good estimation of who Gehrman is, but what if we could look into what he used to be? What he was like at different parts of development? One must be cautious with analyzing cut content, but I think it's valuable to see previous versions of characters to better understand what they ended up being. So let's look at some older versions of Gehrman and see what's changed and what stood the test of time. Before I start, I want to share that I learned of these from Mephistophia's Bloodborne wiki, and in the dialogue reference, dialogue is separated into 3 colors: white for in-game dialogue, yellow for cut dialogue with subtitles, and purple for cut dialogue without subtitles. Why does this matter? Because I'm operating under the assumption that the purple dialogue was written earlier in development than the yellow, due to it being cut before it received subtitles, implying that the stage it never reached. He also sounds like a different person from retail on the yellow dialogue. Let's look at the purple dialogue first. Just as a warning, Gehrman does cough and hack up a lot of fluid in a few of these clips, so be prepared if that's something that bothers you.
Oh, Lawrence, how magnificently the flame burns. Hunters are held here to be sent on horrific hunts, their souls rotted by blood and madness. We've no need for this accursed abode. Let flame cleanse this house of horrors. These frightful things, look at them burn. All ye hunters, let it be known, we are free, free as the wind.
One of the first things to notice is that it appears that Gehrman is speaking to Lawrence directly, as if he's actually here in the dream. Another detail that's apparent is that this Gehrman is much more spirited than he is in the retail version. He's open about the pain the hunters experience during the hunts, and he wants to see an end to them. He's taking action to rebel against Flora, the moon presence, and free the hunters, far from resigning himself to his fate. This is a stark contrast to the retail version, where he begs for Lawrence to free him and begrudgingly fulfills his role of Hunter's helper. This Gehrman sounded like he had a plan all along, or seized the moment when it showed itself. Clearly, something monumental is occurring right now, and we only get the smallest window into what's happening.
Lawrence, the end is not far away now. Every last dream will burn out, and Flora will return from the moon. As for us, the time has come to honor our vows. Hunters are needed no longer. You and I shall fight to the death, and she will consume the victor. The way we've always said we'd end it, you recall. Oh, Lawrence, of course you remember.
In a surprising turn of events, we see that Gehrman and Lawrence were slated to fight each other. For Lawrence to not only be alive, but also make it to the dream only to have the fight with Gehrman you're meant to in the retail version, it's such a different story, and it only makes you wonder how drastically it changed throughout development until it arrived to what we got. These were the most striking pieces of cut dialogue I found, as it opens up so many questions about the story and where it was in this point of development, but there's still more to look at. In his yellow dialogue, Gehrman sounds a bit more worn down by the dream, closer to his retail version, but some of his rebelliousness remains.
Lawrence, I'm getting old. I'm of little help, and to wake is to die. But I'm not entirely useless. I can still do my share. How long I've waited for this chance to do something.
It sounds like Gehrman was lying in wait until the perfect moment to strike, much how the purple dialogue sounds. We can't gather exactly what he was planning to do, but likely it's still related to the dream in Flora. It's also possible that this opportunity he was waiting for is tied to the hunter. I imagine our actions are making things play out differently than usual.
fire cast upon the workshop. Well, my good hunter, the night is long, the darkness thick. Don't say you weren't warned.
This is an interesting piece of dialogue as it strongly implies the hunter is the one who set the workshop on fire. Now they are the one taking a stand against the hunts. Very different from retail, where the only act of defiance we can give is rejecting Gehrman's offer. It appears that putting an end to the hunts for good was a reoccurring theme throughout development.
What? Looking to free me? Then I graciously accept. Forgive me, Lawrence. I could not wait. The night and the dream were long.
Here, Gehrman actually does give in and allows the hunter to kill him. He even apologized to Lawrence for breaking his promise. On the one hand, something I actually liked about retail Gehrman was his selfless decision to take on the onus of the hunter's helper by himself, which he is clearly shirking here. And yet, with his reserved, detached attitude largely absent in this version, I find myself forgiving of this. I actually want him to find peace now.
What were you thinking? If I die, you are to be next. What is it you want from this horrific nightmare?
Here he reveals that Flora will take the hunter now that Gehrman is defeated, something that you have to witness for yourself in the retail version. While I understand that this is cut dialogue, it does further support the idea that Gehrman is trying to keep other hunters from sharing his fate. His delivery is completely nonplussed. He cannot understand why you would want to stay in the dream, especially with how much it's tormented him. While more subtle, he remains confused over this in the retail version.
Dear, oh dear, what was it? The hunt? The blood? Or the horrible dream?
It is a good question, though. What could the hunter see in the dream that would make them want to stay? Perhaps they simply have not been there long enough for it to feel like a prison, like it does to Gehrman. Perhaps it's the source of comfort it's meant to be to a hunter, though it can only be that if it's temporary. And perhaps this is how Gehrman initially felt about the dream too, but that wore away once he could no longer leave.
What's taking so long, Lawrence? Yes, the hunt must go on. It is all that keeps us human now. Farewell, Lawrence. I await the realization of your ministration.
This is similar to previous dialogue where Gehrman waits on Lawrence, but then it turns to Gehrman claiming that hunts must continue, a stark contrast to his purple dialogue and even retail dialogue. However, I read this as sarcastic, given his final remark regarding Lawrence's ministration. This is the only blatant indication that Gehrman disapproved of Lawrence's actions. This pairs well with another set of yellow cut dialogue where he still describes Lawrence as a friend.
It has been a long dream, a very long dream. Since I can no longer hunt, this is all I can do. I made a promise to a dear friend. A promise.
This indicates a tumultuous relationship between the two, as despite disagreeing with Lawrence's methods, Gehrman still kept a close relationship with him. So much so that Gehrman's role as Hunter's helper came from a promise he made to Lawrence. In the retail version, there's less explicit evidence of this being the two's relationship. We know that Gehrman is waiting on Lawrence, but it's less obvious whether his role is still tied to a promise with him, or if they still ever had disagreements over blood and beast hunting. Assuming this situation is still prevalent in the retail version isn't disproven by anything in the game, but I like that this version is more clear. I'll close this section with the remaining cut dialogue where I couldn't place where they could be in the story.
Good. You're back, and it will all be over soon then. The moon is close. How fitting on this night to end all nights.
I'm not sure what the context for this line could be, but I assume it would play after defeating Murgo and returning to the dream, or something related to returning to the dream.
Yarnum. How easily she forgets. How quickly she dismisses. Time is a cruel, cruel thing. Haven't you noticed?
Like the purple dialogue, Gehrman is more direct with the hunter about the pain of being a hunter, and more importantly, the agonizingly long time he's been the hunter's helper, whereas in the retail version, you only get this insight into his pain when he talks in his sleep. It seems that in earlier versions, they wanted Gehrman to be more directly expressive rather than reserved. With all the cut dialogue covered, that leaves one question. Is this the better version of Gehrman? No, it's just the version of him I like more. I like that Gehrman doesn't succumb to apathy in these older versions, because drive is a trait I really appreciate in characters. It's also interesting to speculate over why this isn't the Gehrman we ended up getting. Clearly, at some point during creation, the creative leads decided that the morose Gehrman we got is what they wanted, and I'm not going to claim to be a better writer than them. Still, I find jumping into the cut dialogue eye-opening, and it helps solidify that Gehrman, with all his issues, is the man that Miyazaki and his leads truly wanted to portray. Gehrman's difficult to talk about because of his faults and comparatively fewer virtues. I feel like I could wrap all this up with he's a complex character and press export video, but I'd rather touch on something else. Throughout the video, we discussed his detachment when he did and didn't see humanity in others, and I think that makes him a very human character. I often felt the challenge for me while creating this video was to see humanity in him. When it comes to situations like the doll, when someone expresses such callousness and to take advantage for compliancy in multiple ways, why would you want to see any level of human in that? But seeing humanity by no means equals excusing abhorrent behavior, and behind all abhorrent behavior lies a reason. A good reason? Not always. But in most cases, people will feel justified in their actions based on their own values. And it's important to remember that instead of believing in an intangible evil in others. Even the worst people you know of in the world have this complexity. This is what all people are capable of. I believe this approach can help appreciate fictional characters more as well. I can't say that I've come out with a newfound love for Gehrman, as his aforementioned faults still tip the balance out of favor for him, but I do feel like I mostly understand him. I'm in a more secure place than when I started the script, and now I feel comfortable drawing his story to a close, all the mess intact. If any of you felt that my attention to the doll was lacking and there's more I should have brought up, that's because I'm covering her in depth in the next video alongside a guest outside of Bloodborne. We will be comparing similarities in the narratives between the doll and Daniela from Haunting Ground. What do these two have in common? Well, you'll soon see.